Hey everybody, it's Tom, and I'm coming to you today, Tom Lynn, with a little bit of Karl Marx. Karl Marx, you've probably heard of him. He's probably most well known for two works: the Communist Manifesto, which he wrote with Friedrich Engels, and Das Kapital or Capital, the latter of which, especially early on, was a sort of Bible to socialism, as some people have said. But what we're going to draw on today is an essay of his. Well, it was actually a talk that he gave, which wasn't published in his lifetime, but was found among his papers and published by his daughter in 1899. And it was actually a talk given in 1865 to the Working Men's Association and to an issue which was both current then and is current now, as to the advisability of raising wages. Because there were some people, such as Citizen Weston, whom Marx mentioned several times in the course of his remarks, believed that discretion must be exercised in raising wages because it would potentially endanger the economic health of the society more generally. And Marx goes along these points, and I would say he dispatches them quite persuasively. So the essay, by the way, is entitled, simply enough, Value, Price, and Profit. And it's actually in lots of collections of Marx's writings. You can find it online at marxists.org. I actually, the essay, I got this old book years ago, The Essential Left, which has four very solid texts. But we're going to talk about value, price, and profit because now you see resistance to the raising of wages generally in respect to the question of minimum wage or whether we should raise the minimum wage, whether it be to 10 or 15 or $20 or whatever. Okay. And those on the other side of the fence say, no, you don't want to do that. It's going to have deleterious consequences. The most common plaint is that it's going to have an inflationary repercussion. It also, is going to cut into profits. It's going to disincentivize investment. These are the sorts of tropes that you encounter, which are also the sorts of tropes which are, though in slightly different vocabulary, raised by a Citizen Weston. One ground was that in his view, what you have is a kind of zero-sum game, that the level of production economically on a national basis is a fixed quantity. So that if you raise the wages in response, you're going to have a retaliation on the part of the capitalist that will raise the prices, and this will create, in virtue of the fact that there's only so much to go around, a rather unpleasant situation. The refuge of those who want to resist the idea that people should be remunerated more soundly than they are at present is in the idea that the wage ultimately is a kind of commodity. And like all commodities, is determined by the interplay of supply and demand. And it is at the temple of supply and demand that we need to give forth our devotions. And really, they just don't wash. And you don't have to be a radical to see that they don't wash. In fact, at several points in this essay, Marx draws on or alludes to Adam Smith or David Ricardo, both classical economists who are cited as champions of by the free market system. But you know what? This is exactly what Smith or Ricardo would have said. And the commonality among people like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx is that they all subscribe to the labor theory of value. If you go nowadays and take your average economics class, microeconomics, macroeconomics, introduction to economics, or what have you, you get down to the question of value, or rather you get down to the what is value, what is price is the question that is asked. What is price? And the answer forthcoming is that price is a function of the marginal utility of value, which is just really a more sophisticated way of asserting the same point, that it's the outcome of supply and demand, but it kind of overlooks an important differential, the differential between price and value. Price is an index of value, but it's not the same as value, which may sound like I'm splitting hairs, but it's actually a momentous point for understanding in a deeper way the logic of this mode of production capitalism. Karl Marx, in this essay, takes on the same question. He says, okay, all right, we get down to this. Price is the outcome of supply and demand. But what does that really mean? He says that what it really does is it begs a question. Because why do supply and demand come to a common point? Why do they equilibrate here as opposed to there? Another way of approaching the same issue in a different way is to say, how come it's possible to say, assert that you can buy an automobile with so many cups of coffee? But you can actually do that math, right? But a cup of coffee and an automobile, these are two very different things. What makes them commensurable? Okay? Or whatever, cotton candy and power tools. You can take any two commodities and you can theoretically barter or exchange them, right? Is this not this very thing which drives supply and demand to equilibrate at a common point? What is this thing? Well, the answer he gives to that question is labor, or the capacity to labor, to be more precise. In Capital, he talks about it as socially necessary labor time. And in conjunction with these points, rather than just going on as I usually do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read a passage from Marx, two passages actually, which will help elucidate what's happening here. I could really read the whole essay. But anyway, I'll just read these two passages. Section 5, Wages and Prices, is where we're going to arrive at this additional remark. A commodity has a value because it is a crystallization of social labor. The greatness of its value, or its relative value, depends upon the greater or lesser amount of that social substance contained in it, that is to say, on the relative mass of labor necessary for its production. The relative values of commodities are therefore determined by the respective quantities or amounts of labor worked up, realized, fixed in them. The correlative quantities of commodities which can be produced in the same time of labor are equal, or the value of one commodity is to the value of another commodity, as the quantity of labor fixed in the one is to the quantity of labor fixed in the other. And thus is the basis whereupon you can answer the question, how many cups of coffee does it take to buy a Maserati? But you're like, well, what does he mean by social labor? And that's the second passage here, where he provides a nice little definition. You will recollect that I used the word social labor, and many points are involved in this qualification of social. In saying that the value of a commodity is determined by the quantity of labor worked up or crystallized in it, we mean the quantity of labor necessary for its production in a given state of society, under certain average conditions of production with a certain social average intensity and average skill of the labor employed. And he goes on from there to talk, for example, about how the Powerloom affects productivity, which ramifies significantly for the price of labor. So what's going on there? Just a little bit of elaboration. What we're really talking about, once you see things in this light, is power relation. Because you see that the price is an index of value, and value is an indication of how much we're going to respect this or that or the other form of work which then becomes a question of who determines what is going to happen. And that process is not democratically carried out in a market society where people are subjected to the logic of a wage. The wage restricts to what people have access, both in the sense that the wage relationship divides them from access to participation in the fruits of its own labor, and also to what is necessary for them just to live today and get to tomorrow. The means for that restriction is the leveraging of the means of production by those who own them. The people who own the buildings, the machines, all the rest of it, they're the capitalist class. When you see it like that, then you get really like, oh, wait a second, this capitalism thing's such a great thing after all, or does it maybe create some serious issues? Because it seems like its very structure is such that even if the owners of the means of production are perfectly well-meaning, they, by the imperatives of the economy, are still going to be compelled to make decisions which are at odds with everybody's interest. So there's a fundamental conflict of interest between ownership and labor. So it's not enough to simply champion a fair wage for a fair day's work. We have to say it's time to move beyond that and reimagine how we're going to make decisions as a society in terms of our relationship with resources and so forth. How are we going to make those decisions in a way that no longer necessitates this kind of conflict? That has kind of been forgotten by many, or at least the acknowledgement of that ineluctable conflict has been very much muted. And the result is a discourse, a public conversation, which permits those with the power to perpetuate and expand it in a relatively open-ended fashion. So that's the gist of what he covers in Value, Price, and Profit. And I really hope you go ahead and check it out, or even go ahead and check out Marx's other stuff. There's no shortage of it. The Communist Manifesto. Exciting stuff. Gets you all worked up. Or Capital, which goes into exhaustive detail on these and other points. But if you just really want to get like a nutshell, if you're only going to read one thing by Marx, I would say read this. Though I would hope ultimately you read more than one thing by Marx. You should also check out, there's lots of great stuff out there by David Harvey, Richard Wolff, Wolff. There's a whole array of Marxist resource out there, which I would encourage you to explore. Marxists.org, for example. So, but I think that'll wrap it up for today. I could go on, but I'm going to restrain myself. And I just wanted, to bring that to you. So hopefully you were intrigued. You found these remarks helpful. And in all events, I thank you for listening. We'll have some more stuff, more videos forthcoming. So I will catch you guys later.